Even men at the top of their game find themselves wanting more from life. Whether it's more meaning, unshakable confidence, a bigger impact, more money, deeper love, a hotter sex life, or a powerful legacy. Find out how good your life can be on this episode of Man Alive. Also, did you know there's a skill many men never learn that ends up seriously limiting your professional success and satisfaction in your love and sex life? I put together a free guide to explain this unknown skill and give you exactly what you need to use it today. Get it by heading over to ShaynaJamesCoaching.com or text the word ALIVE, A-L-I-V-E, to 44144. That's 44144. You'll also get access to Man Alive outtakes, raw footage, and bonus videos you can only get there. Hello and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I am excited to be here today and have an amazing guest who's a friend and colleague, Ray Brecka. Ray, thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
And we want to talk about the overlaps between sales and romantic relationship, which it's funny, we're not exactly sure where this is going to go, to be totally honest. But we met up recently and started to talk about some of our clients and some of the struggles and challenges that we've worked with our clients in the realm of both sales or business and romantic relationship. And Ray and I have known each other for about a little over a decade, we realized. Mm-hmm. We have facilitated the Authentic Man program together. Ray started leading a course called the Red Pill in Boulder, which was an offshoot of the Authentic Man program with a bigger group of men, I think, right? Like 30 to 50 men or something.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So doing this really, Ray's been doing his own deep work and has led men's work for decades at this point. And yeah, you know, one of the things I'll say about you, Ray, is that I've always trusted you from the first moment we met. And I think this actually could go into a little bit about what we're going to talk about. But, you know, there's a way I've found that when a man either walks into a room or introduces himself to me, I get a feeling, right? And I get this feeling of, is he trustworthy or not? Is he going to respect me or not? Is he going to be real or not? And it's hard to put all of this into words, and it's hard, you know, in one sentence to capture this, but I think we can talk more about this as we go. But with you, I always had that sense like, oh, you care about me. You know, you're on my side. You aren't someone who needs me to just show a happy face. We can have these real conversations. We can be honest. So I want to thank you for that, first of all. And I think it does kind of bleed into where we're going. And that when you show up on a sales call or when you show up to ask someone out on a date or at home with your partner, right? Other people, and especially women, but I think men too, whether you're in a, you know, relationship with a woman or man or sales call with a woman or a man, you know, we feel each other, right? There's this deeper layer on which we're connecting. So do you want to say a little bit too, Ray, about one of your clients in particular who came to you?
Yeah. So the way it happened, I was at a cocktail party for the holidays with a client of mine. He was a CFO at some large retailer, and we were talking. He introduced me to his friend, and we started chatting about the work with the Red Pill I'd done with guys and having profound connections with women, some of the work that we share. And so we were talking about that, and nothing really came of it. But he's like curious about the work, and he wasn't in a relationship at the time. And then a year later, he reached out to me saying, "Hey, do you know any good sales coaches?" And so I called him. I said, "So what are you looking for?" And he's at a startup. He's in over his head. In a startup, there's not a whole lot of sales process. So it's kind of like change is very frequent. It's chaos. There's not a lot of grounding in that. And he had a manager who was threatened to push him out. It was like basically put him on a performance plan. And so he was like, I've got
I need help.
expenses.
Yeah.
I mean, I said, well, if you hire a sales coach, it could be $10,000 a month, and
Mhm.
they make you go through their program. They sell a program, then coaching is a follow up. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I
Mhm.
looked for a year myself, and I couldn't find one. So what do you really want to do? And we started talking about that. And then he said, "Oh, that stuff you do with women, like and your red pill." He said, "I want that too." I said, "So
Uh-huh.
you want
You want both?
sales coaching and relationship coaching?" And so very quickly we talked about how the parallels are just they're intertwined. So in other
Yeah.
words, with him, with his manager, he was always afraid to be exposed, like he didn't know what he was doing. So he'd
Mm-hmm.
get up in a presentation to his manager for his like quarterly business review, and he would start talking a lot because he was nervous and
Uh-huh.
didn't want to seem like the guy who didn't know what he was talking about. But
Right.
what happened is he lost the crowd because he was nervous, and
Right.
his worst fear came true. Like they thought he was rambling and wandering, and they started to not trust him or
Uh-huh.
question him. And I said, well, so how is that like what you're doing
Right.
with
How does that
women?
overlap
How
with
does it
women?
overlap? And he's like, well, when I get nervous with a woman, I start talking too much and lose connection. And
Yeah.
so that was just one example.
Well,
But
yeah, and I think we can just even put a kind of pin there, right? As one
mhm,
of the overlaps and one of the powers or the skills in a way in relationship and in business or sales, right? Is this way of speaking with intention or
mhm,
knowing where you're coming from or what you're wanting to create as you speak, and then being able to actually, you know, stay in connection
mhm,
while you're speaking as opposed to
mhm.
just rambling on, or what we might call captive audience in
Captive audience,
in
yes.
the romantic relationship world, right? You're just talking and talking and not aware of the impact you're having on someone.
Hmm. You're
Mhm.
talking at them versus with them, and their eyes are kind of rolling back in their head, and you've lost them.
Right.
So what I found, on the same point before I forget, it's like you have to have really tough conversations in relationship with your primary partner.
Yes.
If you want to have true deep intimacy, as you and I both know, you have to go where the fire is hot, right? So you
There's
have
a
to,
big sigh there, right? I wish
you're like,
in my fantasy it could just be easy, but in the reality, if you really want to have those deep connections, you've got to have
mhm.
those intense conversations.
And then if you can like hold space for her while you're having those deep conversations and not disappear and just let her have her reaction, then that builds that trust.
Right. And I think
And
we should use what you just said and really explain what that even means, right? Like, because I could see a man just being like, wait, what? She has a reaction, I hold space. What on earth does that even mean?
good point.
Right. And so I'm just thinking of conversations I've had in the past where, to go into the intensity of what some of those conversations may be, right? Like I have a tendency I was going to say as a woman, but maybe this is just as a person, um, to imagine what someone else wants and then kind of cater to that, right? Like if I'm in a relationship with, and I, tend to date men, if I'm in a relationship with a man and I look at him and I see on his face that he looks tired,
Hmm.
I might then kind of bring myself down in my energy to try to like be on an equal level and not offend him or not, have him feel like um I'm happy and he's not, or I do this thing, right? And I've
Hmm.
had a conversation in relationship about that where I came and said, oh my God, I'm realizing like I'm losing myself.
Hmm.
I'm doing these things to try to take care of us and our relationship. And yet then I end up feeling dull and weird
Hmm.
and like, I want to run from this relationship. Right. And to have a man hold space for that, which I've had, which I feel very blessed to have,
Hmm.
right, would be a man being able to say, and you can give an example too, right? But from my examples, like, wow, okay, what is that like? Tell me more. I want to know when this happens. Like, let's really get into this instead of,
Yeah.
wait, are you telling me you want to leave our relationship? Or like, what are you telling me? Are you blaming me? Are you, right? All
Hmm.
of those things that could happen that I would say are not holding space.
Right.
that holding space is really like, okay, how can I be with you in this? How can we explore
Right.
this together? How can I stay grounded?
Yeah, and not have a reaction where you get defensive or try to defend yourself, or you're just listening, taking it in, asking questions. You may be feeling a lot of intensity over
Mm-hmm.
on your side of the fence, but it's like, how can you just be with that and be with your partner or the woman, and just be awake at the
Right.
wheel.
Right. Which is, God, I think one of the most amazing skills in the world, I think in business and in relationship, is to be able to feel intensity, or what I think we would say as emotions, anger, fear, like, oh shit, she's going to leave, or oh God, this client is not going to say yes, I'm going to lose this
Mm-hmm.
deal. The
Mm-hmm.
fear, the fear, the anger, the sadness, the all of it, hopelessness, I'm on the survival kind of
Mm-hmm.
frustrations or terror or whatever, and to still be able to say to someone, okay, I want to listen to you, I want to hear you. This is what I hear you saying, right? Because sometimes our minds can get really cloudy and unclear when all
Yeah.
of that emotion's happening.
Yeah, and this happened to me as a sales professional. It happened. I was with an executive meeting about 3 weeks ago, and I could just tell with his body, he was like, his body language to me was very closed off,
Mm-hmm.
including when he went and got me at the front door of the company, walked me back. He was walking ahead of me,
Mm.
wasn't giving me eye contact. I could just feel something was up.
Uh-huh.
And so we started a meeting off, and I was there with one of my colleagues, and he stopped and he first said, well, before we even start, what I need is a commitment from you. And he pointed at me, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
wow, with some energy.
Uh-huh.
He's like, I need you to stop selling in my company for the next 12 months and start delivering value on what we already own.
Wow.
And I was like, first of all, my colleague sitting there, and he was shocked, and I was shocked.
I
So
could see you like
it was
not
very,
breathing.
I could feel all this intensity. I'm like, shit, this guy is like pissed. And I, calmly as I could, I could feel like something in my throat, and I just said, hey, listen, it seems like you're upset. I get it. I'm primarily measured on your success and your happiness as a client. So client satisfaction, that's my biggest metric. And meanwhile, I was calm saying that. I said, I want to fully understand what you're talking about.
Uh-huh.
And then just said, please say more, like what's
Yeah,
going
tell
on.
me.
And,
Which is
and
brilliant. I just want to, right? Your ability to do that instead of be like, shit, this guy is mad at me. Fuck, I've got to defend and prove, like, hey, I'm not here to sell. I'm here to make you happy. Why are you coming down on me? And, or shrink back and just be like, okay, I promise I won't do anything to make you upset. Either end of the spectrum, which again, in our work together in the relationship realm is like
mm-hmm,
posturing or collapsing,
mm-hmm.
probably would not have gone over as well as what you did.
Yeah, I could have easily got defensive and say, well, you're not my boss. You're not telling me what to do. I
Right.
could have engaged him at that level, but for the next 10 minutes, I could feel this like intensity in my body. And I was pissed,
Uh-huh.
and I was kind of like under my breath saying, F you, dude. Like,
Uh-huh.
don't tell me what to do. I mean, so I was having that dialogue,
Yep.
but my point is, though, is even in the corporate world, you have these really tough conversations. They're difficult. It's the same way you'd have with your primary partner. Can
Mhm.
you stay on your side of the fence and just stay with all that intensity and not defend it, but just like try to take a step back, breathe, and just go, okay. And then the result was like, by the end, we shook hands and stuff. I don't necessarily like the way he approached that. It
Uh-huh.
wouldn't be the way I would do it.
Uh-huh.
But he has this like little prickly, angry side of him that comes out and flares up when he's
When
not
he
the
feels threatened, right? Or
yeah.
when he feels like
Hmm.
something's going wrong.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just it happens in both realms,
Yeah.
but your experience with either your primary partner or that person in a sales environment, it's the same feelings you get inside, the same way you can react, being
Right.
grounded and just feeling all of it and staying right there with the conversation.
Yeah. And I just think, okay, we are not none of us are perfect. And so the more scared we get, the more either kind of clenched or um, sharp or whatever it is, we can tend to bring up conversations, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I'm imagining you listening, if you've ever been in a romantic relationship, which, most people have at some point, you've gone down that road of bringing something to your partner or your partner bringing something to you where you're like, wow, okay, if we could have actually, when you debrief it, you think if we could have started in a different way,
Mm-hmm.
the whole thing would have taken, less heartache, less energy, there would have been less fighting, whatever. Right. And so then sometimes I think in romantic relationship, whether it's partner A or partner B or whoever it is, like, okay, can I have compassion for the fact that my partner just brought something to me and I don't appreciate the approach,
Mm-hmm.
but can I look deeper to see, what's the hurt, what's the pain, what's the need that this
Mm-hmm.
person is bringing to me? And then can we have a conversation about that? Then maybe later we talk about, the way you brought it to me really hurt, or it really,
Yeah.
but just like you did with this client of yours, like, all right, I can hold and tolerate inside of me this anger, this frustration, this, you know, fear, maybe that you might even lose that client. And I can inquire and get curious and have a conversation on a different level with the
Mm-hmm.
person in front of me.
Totally. And I started thinking as you said that, and it may not all happen in that conversation.
Right.
It may be one of those things that, like, let's say an hour later, you just got done talking to your partner, then there was something that came up that you're like, oh, why didn't I say, I want to say this too.
Yeah.
So you can always go back and revisit the conversation and say, hey,
Yes.
can I just check in with you on something? There's something that I thought of after we talked. The emotional content is lower for you and you're
Yeah.
more clear headed. And oh, here's something I forgot to mention in our conversation earlier. So
Yeah.
you get to go back and revisit that conversation. So you don't have to get it all done right there on the spot and
I
have it all
love that.
tied up.
I have so many of my clients, I felt relieved knowing that when I'm like, well, why don't you go back? Why don't you go back and have a follow-up conversation? And they're like, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes. And actually, right, like as you're saying, there's less energy and there's less of that tension there and everybody's more clear-headed. So you're able to do that. Do you also do that in your sales conversations or in your client conversations?
Totally. Yeah. Because what happens in complex sales cycles is that there are so many moving pieces and there's so many steps. And, you're in a meeting and it may be a half hour, it's all you have. And there's like 5 things you wanted to get to and you got to 3 of them. So it's one of those things, even though you think you've got everything covered, you may have to go back and revisit that and get in front of the person just to keep going on that thread. So there's always that place you can go back and revisit that. Or there's something where they made a comment and you want to dive in deeper to it and you didn't have the time to do it. So,
Right.
but yeah, you always have to keep going back because there's always more to cover and there's always a way to ask a different question. Because sometimes in sales, if you take things at face value and don't get underneath the comment or really understand the clear process, like you're in management, your manager's always asking, like, okay, so when we get the verbal, then what happens next? Then what happens next? They want to know all the checks and balances to get that contract signed. And if you don't have your
Right.
bases covered, which means you got to maybe, oh shit, I didn't get that one. You got to go back to the executive and talk about what's missing
Right.
and get clear on the steps.
Well, right. And I think, I'm just thinking how I've coached a lot of entrepreneurs and people who are coaches and um, whether it's business coaches or life coaches or even people who are doing, more body work and those kind of businesses as well. And when they're having those initial consultations, that kind of sales process of
Mm-hmm.
getting to know a potential client and, what's going on with you and are we a fit to work together?
Mm-hmm.
Um, right. Sometimes it is just, it's more than one step at
Mm-hmm.
times, and the ability to actually go back and say, oh, here's a piece that we never actually got to. Or I've found, I think where I was going with this one was, sometimes I've had people myself, and I've coached people where someone has said yes, like, sure, I'd love to hire you, or I'd love to take you up on your services, and then they fade out or they don't
Mm-hmm.
show up again,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that often happens when we either haven't covered something, or something happened in the dynamic that it got a little bit awkward or a little bit forced or a little bit inauthentic.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then we didn't actually go back and speak to that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think that happens in the romantic, we'll call it a romantic cycle also, of
The
either
romantic sales cycle.
the romantic sales cycle, right? Like we're
Yeah.
kind of selling ourselves in a way, like, do you want to start to date me, or would you be intimate with me? There is kind of if it's not sales, it's kind of enrolling someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't speak to those moments that are awkward or tense, if we just kind of barrel through those
Mm-hmm.
and try to get past them, I find that it creates a very untrustworthy dynamic, I'll
Mm-hmm.
say.
Yeah, and there's also a place if you don't pick up on some of the cues along the way, and you
Yeah.
kind of just step over it and keep going, they may have given you information. They meaning either your sales prospect or your primary partner. There's a little piece of information there that
Yeah.
was a big deal to them that you just didn't hear or pick up on, and that there's value in that too. So really stop
Yes.
and going, so what did you mean by that, or what?
Yeah. I'm wondering if we can think of an example, because I think it's so much easier to hear when there's an example versus we're talking about it,
Sure, I can give you one from a sales standpoint.
Yeah.
I've been working on a contract for 5 months with this large medical device company, and I've done all the right things, checked all the boxes, met with the executives, and the deal stalled. It was pretty much a dead deal.
Mm-hmm.
And all along, the guy told me, is like, listen, we don't have budget for 2017. If we could start smaller and do a trial for less time, we could probably get that approved. And I heard that and said, oh no, what I was told from my management is we only do 2-year deals. So I'm like, nope, nope. So then I talked to a colleague of my team, said, we know we do short-term deals. Are you aware of that? You have to get approval. And I said, did not know that. So I came back to the guy and
So
said,
you got approval from your own company.
yeah, to go around the 2-year requirement. And
Yeah.
I put together a 5-month deal for them with certain stipulations, but they jumped all over it. I'm getting a contract tomorrow.
Oh.
So there's that little thing where all along he was saying, if we could do a shorter term deal, a trial period, or less money,
Yeah.
but I couldn't hear that because I didn't think I had a solution for the guy.
Right.
But then I kept investigating. I kept telling people what was going on. Like sales is like, it's a lot like relationship, man. If you are out there, especially if you're a guy, like the guys that you work with, if you're doing it alone and not getting perspective, I think it's super helpful to always get perspective, so you can say, hey, let me just run something by you. What do you think?
Yeah.
Do that in sales all the time, because you have your way of looking at the world, and then people can share, and some may fit, some may not fit, but it just gives you new ideas to keep things moving forward.
Well,
So I think that's.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just thinking, like, that's so familiar to me, to what a lot of the men I work with do. Can I run this by you? Because who am I going to tell that, I approached my wife last night and wanted to have sex, and this is how I said it, and this is what happened, right? Like, who else am I going to talk to about that? I mean, some men have some men friends, where you can actually be that honest and real. But even men who go deep with each other and, are real with each other, I've found, there are these, who has time these days, we're often so busy, but B, like, there are often these conversations where a lot of men come to me because they feel so vulnerable having this conversation with another man or a friend or someone, and saying, yeah, I felt like I got rejected, or I did get rejected. Right. I'm just thinking of an example in this realm of these things that go that are missed, kind of like you were saying, right? Like the guy who, he said, we don't have the budget for this year, right? Or where with one of my clients who is dating, right? This woman said they went out on a date. They were having a really great time. And then she disappeared. And he felt really devastated. He was like, it's been a long time since I've met someone who I actually felt like I could connect this deeply with. And yet, she totally disappeared. And as we got into it more, I often have my clients go back to a date or someone and say, hey, you know, if you're open to it, I'd love to hear more about what happened.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not attached that we have to date each other, but I felt a really
Yeah.
good connection. And because knowing is so much more powerful or more beneficial in a way than just being left in your own stories. Your own stories tend to be so much
Yeah.
worse,
It's so
right?
crazy too. So far from the truth in most
Right.
cases.
So far from
Yeah.
the truth. So as we started talking about this date, he said, the what part of what was amazing about it was that we had so much fun, there was so much humor, and she admitted some really vulnerable things to me about her past. And
Mm.
that sparked something for me where I was like, oh, it's quite possible that she felt so vulnerable and so exposed, and she felt so safe with you that she could tell you these things. But she might have gone home afterward and just been like, I can't believe I said those things. I can't believe I opened up to him in that way. I don't ever want to see this man again,
Mm-hmm.
in a way, because even though it's really what she wants is to get to be that vulnerable, that it could be really scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why don't you go back and ask her? Or why don't you go back and say, you shared some vulnerable things with me. I just want you to know that I'm holding those in, the deepest of trust and I feel this care for you,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd love to know what happened. Anyway, the whole story came back around where she actually responded and said, "You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I felt really exposed and I feel really scared, and I don't always have the most belief in myself, or my self-worth can be kind of
Yeah.
low." And so the other part where this comes back around is later, they actually started dating, and then a couple weeks later he started to feel this pressure, and like she was needing him to validate her.
Mm.
And so then we came back around and we were talking, right, about that moment where she said, my self-worth is pretty low. And then it was just like, oh, it all starts to make sense when we don't skip over those comments that people make
Mm-hmm.
and the truths that we share about ourselves, or whether it's sales or relationship, or a woman who you're in, or woman or man, again, who, you're in romantic relationship with, who is talking about feeling, whether it's stressed or tired or something, and you're trying to have it be more intimate or more sexual or romantic, and then trying to get to sex before actually relaxing or connecting on that level that's going to have your partner, who just said they were really stressed out and tired, get to kind of come down or relax into this place where then they're more open to that romantic
Mm-hmm.
experience. You know what I mean?
You got to meet them where they are, and then from there, if you do that, then it's like they can relax and say, "Oh yeah, now I am more available for that.
Right.
I'm ready to go." But if you don't meet them where they are and just step over it and just go on to like what you want to accomplish,
Yeah.
you know how that one turns out, right? You'll get the no.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You get the no, right? And so if you're in a relationship with a woman and you come home and she's like, "Oh my God, the house is a mess. I feel horrible. I can't get anything done. I'm totally stressed out." And you're like, "Okay, baby, let's go to bed." It might work, right? It might work. You might get into bed, and then at some point she might be like, "Oh God, there's still crap all over the place and I can't think straight." And, so
Mm-hmm.
then you've bypassed, like, maybe we do a 5-minute cleanup. We run around the house, we put things away. Allison Armstrong, who's amazing, talks about relationships between men and women, is just like, don't try to seduce your woman if there's laundry in the room, right? Like, handle the things first, because she's multi-focused and she's going
Mm-hmm.
to see everything around and not be able to get turned on unless some of those things are taken care of.
Right.
I love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Such a great example though, those loose threads, I imagine in your sales cycles too. It's like what you're pointing to. Oh, these things that are kind of, they're not fully answered. Okay, so I was just having a thought of going back to the beginning where we started talking about how, or I started saying that when I met you, from the moment I met you, right, you felt trustworthy to me. I felt your care about me. I felt I felt this kind of presence in you that I felt safe, I felt relaxed, and I also, um, I don't want to say it was like all just in my heart, right? Like in my body, I could feel your presence also.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was like a strength and a manliness in you, as well as that kind of, oh, I feel safe and I feel cared about.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking about, okay, right, how can we explain that more? Because there are these kind of invisible, I think, 7%
Yep.
of communication, 7% of communication is words, and 93% is all these other things, tone of voice, body language, and
Yeah.
that matters in relationship and in business.
Totally does. There's in the corporate world, like the company that I work for. I was talking to you a bit about this. They're a traits-based hiring company, so they
Huh.
look at your resume, they look at past performance, that you know what you're doing, but they look for this term called executive presence, and you've probably
Mm-hmm.
heard it before. But it's basically when you walk into a room, you're meeting with a C-level executive. Can you, you don't have that same title, but can you walk in there as a peer and be
Uh-huh.
confident and run an effective meeting and not waste their time?
Uh-huh. Can you
I
hold your
mean,
own in that?
can you hold your own and have an
Mm-hmm.
intelligent business conversation where you're looking the guy in the eye and you're not apologizing, you're just having a serious business conversation. You've done your homework, and the time was very valuable for him. You didn't waste it, and
Mm-hmm.
you were grounded and eye contact, and just at the end, what the net result for that is like, hey, you want to get invited back, and you want to build that respect with the executive, so that when he sees you calling or email next time, you don't go into the delete box or I'm not going to see you
Right.
again, because these guys, the guys that I call on, shit, they're having meetings from 7:30 till 5:30 at night, and for you to get a half hour of their time, it's a big
Pretty
deal for them.
precious.
So that
Yeah.
executive presence allows you to command that space and just be seen as a peer, and
Yeah.
and that you add value and you're just there like running the meeting effectively. So that's what I would
Mm.
term executive presence. And that's that same thing you talked about
Mm.
when we met. There was something that you could feel that I'm imagining allowed you to trust and let your body relax. Same thing with the executive. Like, oh, okay, he's got this. He's not got an eye on
Yes.
like, oh, geez, this guy's wasting my time. Like, I gotta go. Have the admin call me during the meeting to break it up. But there's a felt sense of he's got this.
Well, right. And I'm actually just looking over this list that I've been taking of the points we've been covering, and this might actually capture all of it in a way, right? Where um, the executive presence, and I think I love working on this piece, this presence piece with men, because it does feel like the thing that has men able to do less and just relax into this, confidence and ease,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's in business or in a romantic relationship, is the presence piece. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a kind of executive presence in the business world. And maybe I think we just more call it presence, but it
Mm-hmm.
could be, I work with men on sexual power or that kind of relational presence, which I think is a weird word that most people wouldn't understand that much. But right. But I think about, okay, going back to what all the things you just said, um, how does someone feel around you? And that goes back to often, right? Can you tolerate, as we said before, the intensity? Can
Mm-hmm.
you feel fear? Can you feel doubt? Can you feel sadness? Can you feel anger? Can you feel turn on and attraction? Can you feel all that in your body without either collapsing or posturing, right? Like without getting defensive and tough or challenging, or without getting kind of small and hesitant and I don't want to say weak because I think that has some pretty negative connotations too.
Mm-hmm.
But right, can you walk into a room and look into someone's eye, as you just said, with executive presence,
Mm-hmm.
and really be there? Which be there means, can you be aware of your own body, your own state? Can you be aware of what's happening in the room? Can
Mm-hmm.
you be aware of feeling what this person in front of you may be experiencing? Right? That practice of presence and becoming aware of yourself and another at the same time
Mm-hmm.
is a pretty high level skill that then allows for this really profound connection, like you said in the beginning.
Yeah. I think a lot of this, when you said that, it made me think of just a lot of this stuff is like how can you slow it down for yourself to where the attention's not all on you
Mm-hmm.
and the questions you're going to ask, and then you get into your head, but how can you just slow it down and just pay attention to what's actually happening in the room with that person and
Right.
noticing those little things, either a woman you're dating or married to, or the executive across the room. Like,
Right.
can you just take it all in and notice little subtle cues,
I
energy,
love
body,
that.
voice, like just
Yes. I love
baseline.
practicing that with men and having those conversations like, okay, where's your attention now? And often in the fear or nervousness, it's okay, I'm thinking ahead to what question I'm going to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
And yet then missing that if you were just listening and if you
Mm-hmm.
just stay in the present moment of the conversation, you're given these threads or you're given these whatever you want to say, right? Like you're given the next question
Mm-hmm.
instead of, oh my God, I've got to figure it out. I've got to do this right. I've got to know what it is, right? And then losing that connection, which then you lose someone's trust, you
Right.
lose someone's, feeling connected to you.
Mm-hmm. And this can happen too. I've seen it happen, whether it's the relations for men we've led together. Guys want, like, what are the 3 steps? What's the model? What's the formula? And it happens in sales training. Like, here's how you run a meeting. Here's how you drive a sales cycle. There's
Yep.
all these models on both sides that, like, hey, I want that model. Well, what happens in that is, to your point, like, then you start thinking about the model and the questions, and so they give you information, but you're like, okay, I got it. And then, okay, how about, so you're paying attention to the model in your head and stuck in that,
Mm-hmm.
and you're
Mm-hmm.
missing all these little threads where if you just said, okay, here's where I want to go, this model is useful, but it's not the only way to get there.
Right. It's a
And
map
it's
also.
a
It's
map.
not
It's a
the
map.
the human connection.
Yeah, it's and so much gets lost on the process and sticking to that. Where if it's a map and you're just navigating that and you're following, like you said, there could be things you can dive right deeply into right there that are they're off the map, but you're
They're off
going
the
somewhere
map.
good together. And
Right.
that's the point for me, is like, let go of all that stuff and getting it right and following the process. Just have a connection, get curious about it, and then you know where you want to go, but don't get too rigid around that, I guess, is my point.
I love that. I mean, I think that's a good place to end or to wrap up, right? Is to, there are some skills we can learn, right? There are definitely communication skills we can learn. We
Mm-hmm.
can learn how to be more emotionally intelligent and available.
Mm-hmm.
We can learn how to have these sales cycles and consultation cycles where we're exploring a person or a company's desires and needs, and we're also exploring their challenges and their struggles. And right, if we get so caught in this map and so caught in these structures, we lose that presence
Mm-hmm.
and we lose the very thing that has someone actually trust us, respect us, and feel loyal to us and want more, right? Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's romantic or business, like,
Yeah.
come back. I want more of you. When you're here, I feel good. When you're here, my life feels better. My business goes better, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll do a part two. We can go more into executive presence and all of those skills that I think you and I have worked with over these years that really have turned things around for people, men and women both, where suddenly, people aren't getting promotions or aren't having romantic partners say yes, and then learning some of these deeper skills like we were talking about, and
Mm-hmm.
things change.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. The good thing is you can learn it all, right? You can actually, if you put some attention to it, you can learn it and make it your own.
Yeah.
So it's natural for you. So that's the good news.
Right. Right. Then it's not a new map. It's actually how to actually, you know, stay connected. Yeah. and in real time, right? Versus it's kind of like instead of someone going on a date and looking to check off all of the qualities, or like you said on a business resume, they're actually looking to see in your company, do you have the traits
Mm-hmm.
that have you feel that executive presence? Or when you're on a date, someone's looking for like, are you actually, can you be with me?
Yeah.
Can
Yep.
we go deeper here? Awesome. Thank
Cool.
you. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's some nuggets in there.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I
think
remember what
so.
we talked about, but
I think I can also do a little write up as I look at the show notes around what we captured so that you guys listening, you can get those points of what starts to create this kind of presence.
cool.
Awesome. Thank you, Ray.
My pleasure.
I'm so glad you joined us for today's episode of Man Alive. I hope it gives you a sense of what's possible and how good your life can be. If you like what you heard, I'd be so grateful for you to subscribe to Man Alive and write a quick review that helps men like you find us. And again, head over to shanajamescoaching.com/manalive to get outtakes, videos, and raw footage I only share there. These are some of the most interesting parts of these expert conversations. You can also grab your copy of The Unknown Power to accelerate your career and solidify your confidence with women, because the two are related, and I know you don't have to settle for one or the other. Join us each week for a new episode of Man Alive.